I hope it works right now. So the first speaker of this semester seminar is Raphael Oliveira, who is a postdoc at our institute working with Radek, and he's gonna tell us about Magellanic Clouds clusters. And a very special thanks to Raphael, because he just get noticed and he was asked for giving the seminar just yesterday, and he's replacing the speaker who was unable to come to the observatory. So big thank you to you, and we appreciate that a lot. So thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me here. So it's my second seminar here. My first one was right after I arrived here. So my seminar won't be about microlensing yet. Maybe the next one. But yeah, so last week we were in the microlensing conference in Heidelberg. So lots of people here were there, so it would be too repetitive maybe. But I will present maybe a continuation of the work that I conducted in my PhD. Have to share as well. Share again? Okay. Stop and share. Okay, how it works. Yeah, it's fine. Okay. So yeah, so this is a continuation of my work in the PhD, which was about Magellanic, so star clusters in the Magellanic Bridge, and I'm also presenting some of the work that my colleagues from VISCACHA have obtained. So a bit of introduction. I hope everyone knows some details about the Magellanic Clouds. So the Large Magellanic Cloud is around 50 kiloparsec from us. It has a slightly metal-rich metallicity of around -0.4, and the SMC is a bit farther away, so 60 kiloparsecs, and it's more metal-poor than the LMC. So what we call the Magellanic system is composed not only by these two galaxies, so satellite galaxies, but also it's composed of some gaseous structures around them. So they are called leading arm, which is in the front of the LMC, like in the front of the orbit, the Magellanic string in the past orbit of the system, and the Magellanic Bridge right in between. So I put here some masses, and the point is that the Magellanic Bridge is the only one of these three components that has a considerable stellar mass. So the others are mostly gas. And well, there are not too many students here, but I'm going to ask. So any students know the order of magnitude of the Milky Way? Any guesses? Like the virial mass? The virial mass? Yeah, or total mass, like in general. Like 10 to the 11. Yeah, maybe the stellar mass is the 10 to the 11. If you add dark matter, you go to 10 to the 12. And well, so 10 to the 12 is 1 trillion solar masses. And when you go to the LMC, so the Large Magellanic Cloud, you have 1 order of magnitude less, roughly. And for the SMC, another order of magnitude less. So around 10 to the 10. So easy to remember, right? And here are the masses for the gaseous structures. So as you see, the bridge has very few stellar mass, but it's important to investigate. Okay, so there's a long discussion about the formation of the Magellanic system. And we just recently got some tighter constraints in order to simulate how they formed and evolved to what we see today. So basically from proper motions from ages t and some many-body simulations that use these proper motions as input, there are two main branches of these models, of these formations models. So one of them is Diaz and Becky 2012, that we call bound scenario. And it states that, that they were independent satellites of the Milky Way, and just recently, around 1 or 2 billion years ago, formed a pair, as we see today. Whereas the other one that we call first infall scenario, or second passage scenario, states that it was an old pair of satellites, and just recently, around 2 billion years, got close to the LMC, close enough to interact. So, as the name says, it's either in the first or second passage by the Milky Way. So each of them has their pros and cons, which I will not detail here. Yeah, but as you see, when the video ends, the distribution of the gas, it's very close to what we see from observations, right? So all the components are well reproduced. Important to say that the second one, the first infall scenario, includes one additional epoch of proper motions. Yeah, so I said that all of them have the two has some limitations. And this other plot shows how dependent of the mass these models are. So we could improve better and better the proper motion precision. But what's the most difficult part here? It's what is the exact mass from the Milky Way and from the LMC and SMC. So, for example, either the blue or red ones consider different masses for the Milky Way or for the LMC. And when you have these dips here, it means the closest approach to us as a function of time. And I would like to tell something else, which I forgot. Okay, let's go on. So also, Gaia was very revolutionary for the Milky Way, for the Magellanic Clouds studies. And it was possible to get a lot of information about the kinematics and the three-dimensional structure of these galaxies. So it's not that clear in the projector, but this image shows both the stellar density and the proper motions for the regions of these galaxies. And you see that they have more or less an uniform motion around the center, let's say. But for the SMC, lots of vectors seem to point to the left, which is the direction of the LMC. So this is kind of expected because the SMC is less massive. And also the vectors point to the direction of the bridge, actually. So it suggests some change of material between them. So I mentioned the 3D structure. So a lot of works that use Gaia data uses red clump stars to determine distances, and it allows to deproject the LMC because we see them projected as a plane. And actually the LMC has some depth of 5 kiloparsecs, roughly, and the SMC has up to 20 kiloparsecs depth. And for the LMC, which is what this plot shows, there is some warp in the disk. So the disk's not flat, and it's not exactly aligned. But even when you correct everything, there's a warp in the more external regions, as you see, like to the sides of the dashed line. Something more. Okay, let's try to move this again. Yeah. So something more recent from Gaia DR3 and a lot of line of sight velocities from spectra. Some researchers are getting even better models for the LMC structure. So as you can see, the LMC doesn't even look like a plane, right? With warps, it looks like a Pringle. Let's say. Yeah, and then I think we can see the coordinates more or less. So they have the warp as we see, but several other inhomogeneities. Okay, and last introductory slide before the clusters. Important also to say about the star formation history that people research. So there are several wide field and deep photometric surveys that are increasingly deep in the recent years. So for example, Dark Energy Survey, VMC, which is Vista Magellanic Clouds, I think, and SMASH Survey. And when they combine high resolution spectroscopy, for example, Apogee and Foremost, it's possible to get tight constraints to get the star formation history of the Magellanic Clouds. So in the left, you can see some projections of these star formation histories, for which we can get the ages of the stars, like on average, not very well precise as in clusters. But in the left panel, it isolates a young population of the Magellanic Clouds. And we can clearly see the bridge, right? In the middle, which indicates that the bridge has a young stellar population. But when you isolate all the populations in the right, the bridge vanishes. So probably the bridge has only young population if you only look at the field stars in general. And in the right panel are the star formation rates for the SMC in the upper panel and the LMC in the lower panel. And there are some peaks of the star formation rate for some ages. And for the LMC, there's even an extra parameter, which is in the north region, there is improved star formation rate, which doesn't happen in the south. So maybe important to remember during the whole talk is that around 2 or 1 billion years, the star formation rate increases. And also recently, it increases a lot, like the last million years, few million years. So finally, we get to the clusters. And the Magellanic Clouds have a very rich system of star clusters. So it goes like to the order of the thousands or tens of thousands. And it spans a large range of ages. So it goes from similar to our old globular clusters from the Milky Way, but it also has intermediate age and young massive clusters. And the other characteristics also differ a bit from the Milky Way. So, for example, for the radii, they are more sparse on average, ellipticities, and so on. So, in the left again, like the LMC and the SMC with the star clusters, and each ring means 1 degree from the center. So the LMC goes up to 10 degrees, and the SMC, no, 7 maybe, but including the bridge, obviously. And when you don't have the rings, it's still bridge. We still call it bridge, but we almost don't see any clusters, but just sparse associations. Okay. And the right panel, the right plot, shows how the Magellanic Clouds clusters fill the gap between the Milky Way globular clusters, which are very old and massive, between the globular clusters and the open clusters, which are much younger and are not that massive. So the Magellanic Clouds fills the gap both in age and masses. And when we derive a lot of parameters, for example, from isochron fitting, from structural parameters, like analyzing the density distributions and so on, and some other techniques. So we derive age, metallicity, distance, the radii of the cluster, ellipticity, and the cluster mass, for example. And this way we can understand better the cluster formation, the structure evolution, the mass function, and so on, the solution, and so on. And also important to say here is, you remember that the Magellanic Clouds is slightly more metal poor than the Milky Way. So it's also another gap that these clusters fill compared to the Milky Way. And regarding the SMC, we can understand why there was a slow early enrichment in terms of metals. And in the LMC, why there is an age gap between 4 and 10 billion years, which I'll show in a moment. Okay, so now let's talk only about the bridge. As I said, so I got wrong. So it's 20 kiloparsecs extension and 10 kiloparsec depth, not that deep. There were very few metallicity determinations, especially for the bridge, but it is around -1 in iron over H. The bridge has mostly a blue and young stellar population with several associations, as I said, mostly younger than 100 million years. And the bridge was formed during LMC, during a collision between the clouds, not more than 300 million years ago, but there's a lot of uncertainty here. So they passed very close to one another, and the bridge formed with some exchange of material, probably stripped from the SMC. So as I said, the bridge has several associations and around 130 clusters, showing blue in the left panel. And in the right, again, this idea about the young and old populations, you see that the bridge doesn't show when you assume old stars. Also, you can see clearly here, but the arrows show some proper motion for a large sample of stars. And it seems that there is some material flowing from the SMC to the LMC. Yeah, through the bridge. Okay, so finally about the data. So here I'm not going to tell only about the VISCACHA survey or VISCACHA data, but also about some other data that I'm working on. But yes, so in the PhD, my PhD, I analyzed VISCACHA data, which is a survey that we have around 50 members nowadays. It's mostly Chilean, Brazilian, Argentinian, and all Latin America. So we use the SOAR telescope 4 meter in Chile. We use the adaptive optics system there to get BVI photometry, and we get photometry as deep as like 33.5, 34 in the best cases. And the best point here is the full width half maximum that we get, or the SIN, around 0.6 arc seconds on average. So you see in the GIF so it changes from SOI and SUM. So SOI, it's without adaptive optics, and SUM with adaptive optics. And you see that the stars are much more resolved using adaptive optics, which is very important to analyze the densest clusters in the Magellanic Clouds. Yeah, so we have now the deepest photometry for around 300 clusters in the entire Magellanic Clouds, and 33 of them are in the bridge. So forgot to mention, but we aim at the clusters in the outskirts of the clouds, because we believe that these are the ones that are most affected by tidal interactions between the clouds. So there's more interesting things to discover there. And in green, so the black points are the VISCACHA data. And in green, you have HST photometry for clusters. And you can see that there are some, maybe 100 green points in the LMC in the left and the SMC in the right. So as you know, HST has a very small field of view, which can fill a star cluster, but it's very expensive. It's very hard to get observations with Hubble. So, okay, so let's go to the data. So here's a CMD from VISCACHA for an intermediate age or old cluster, Lindsay 113. It's in the SMC wing, which is the starting of the bridge. And you can see that the CMD goes to like I magnitude of 23, more or less. Corresponds to V 23.5 or 24. Yeah, so here's the final isochrone fitting that I will show in a moment. So here's a graph from our PI, Bruno Dias, which shows the SIN as a function of the limiting magnitude of several surveys. So the algo is here. It's a 2-meter telescope, more or less. The limiting magnitude is like down to 22. And obviously it's not the focus getting deep photometry for the Magellanic Clouds, just variability and so on. So with 4-meter class telescopes, you have like VMC, STEPS, MESH, dark energy survey, which are still limited in terms of SIN. So they have, on average, a SIN of 1 arc second, which is good, but we can do better. And then with VISCACHA, we can get better SINs, like a 0.6, as I said, or 0.5, with the same limiting magnitude, okay? And also, like these red ones are all, except for Rubin, like they are space telescopes, which are not limited by the atmosphere SIN, and they are deeper and deeper. And also I have put like Rubin 10-year there, which will also have a SIN of around 0.6 on average, yes. Okay, so comparing directly with HST, so this is a CMD for the same cluster, Lindsay 113, and we can see that Hubble, like obviously it's more precise, but in terms of depth, it goes like 1 magnitude deeper. So we are doing a good job. with VISCACHA. Okay. Yeah, some other comparisons with HST and ground-based surveys. So this is for field, like for field stars, not a cluster stars. Comparing HST, which is the SELA survey, I think that's the name, compared to VMC, Vista Magellanic Clouds. And in red, you can see the masses each one can assess. So VMC doesn't even reach the main sequence turnoff of the oldest stellar populations, whereas the HST goes down to like 0.2 solar masses for the when you don't have too much crowding and so on. Okay, did I miss something here? No. Okay, so same field of view, I forgot to mention. Yeah. And then like very initial comparison with LSST photometry or Rubin. So I am part of the Brazilian participation group, which has some 50 people like eager to use the data, which will come probably in the early 2028, the first data release. But I'm sure that you saw this image several times. So these are the surveys that Rubin will conduct. And in one of the surveys, they say like wide, fast, and deep, like this WFD, because it will cover more than 20,000 square degrees of the southern sky. For most of the surveys, it will have one observations every 3 days, which we can assess some variability. Okay, 5 filters, 6 filters, UGRISI. So the depth is also put here in the R filter. So for only one exposure is around 24, but when you co-add these 10 years of observations, it's possible to get down to 27 if the crowding allows, obviously. And the median seen, as I said, 0.7 arcseconds. And here are some data from the data preview one, which was released last year. Forgot to put the reference, but there's an interesting paper by Yumi Choi and collaborators, which first assesses this data and makes it public for the LSST members. So it shows the photometry that they get with the commissioning camera for 47 TUC, which is I think the largest globular cluster in the Milky Way. And the interesting thing is that it's projected in the same direction as the SMC, Small Magellanic Cloud. So in the CMD, you can see like the very narrow sequences from the cluster, 47 TUC, and the SMC in the background in fainter magnitudes. So we can see that from a single visit with the commissioning camera, for the SMC, we get around 24, which is as expected. And simulating some synthetic CMDs with these configurations from the LSST, like including the photometric errors and so on. A colleague of mine and me, like Bernardo and I, we have simulated the 10-year photometry that we will get from the LSST. So it will reach down to like 27th magnitude. And again, if crowding allows, we could reach 0.2 solar masses for globular clusters. Magellanic Clouds is almost the same. And the other survey that I'll mention, which I'm not associated, but my group is going to submit a proposal. I'll mention in a moment. So Roman will be launched hopefully in September this year. And it has 3 core community surveys. So 3 main surveys since it was created. One for the galactic bulge, some other for the halo and like to observe galaxies mostly. And for these three community surveys, 75% of the time is available. And the 25 other are for general astrophysics surveys, which includes the one for the galactic plane in the first year. So, yeah, so there was a call announced a few months ago, so cycle 1 of proposals for the Roman Space Telescope to fill this 25% of the time. And our PI from VISCACHA, Bruno Diaz, is also leading this effort, which I'll not show too much details here, just this simulated CMD, which, like, we have the observational errors, expected errors from Roman and several other configurations that we can simulate how the CMD will look like for different ages. And in this case, you can see that Roman observations will go more than 2 or 3 magnitudes deeper than the turnoff. So yeah, forgot to mention, but in this proposal, we are proposing to observe the entire Magellanic Clouds down like to more or less this magnitude. And if possible, to get proper motions 5 years later. So it would be again revolutionary, not only for the cluster science, but also for star formation, history, models, orbits, everyone is like involved. So, okay, so I'll just pass by the methods that I use here. This part's not much different from my first seminar, so I'll not give too much detail. But basically, the image shows VISCACHA data for a young and an old cluster in the same field of view. So our field of view are of 3 per 3 arc minutes. And obviously in blue, it's the youngest one. And okay, so we first make a study of the structure of the cluster, of the density profiles. And for that, in my method that I developed with my collaborators, we sample the density locally around each star of the photometry, because we have resolved photometry for the cluster. So locally, if we do it locally, we have like the number of stars as points, so around 1,000 points to fit the density profile with King models or other models. And then we can derive, most importantly, the core and tidal radius, the density of the background stars, and so on. So after that, we apply some decontamination, statistical method for decontamination, because for these cases, the Gaia proper motions are not deep enough to make membership for the entire cluster. So you can only sample the bright stars. So in this case, we apply some binning in the CMDs of the cluster and of a nearby field. We compare the density of stars in each bin, like several iterations and so on. And at the end, we get membership probabilities, not based in proper motions, important to say. And lastly, for the isochron fitting, we apply also statistical methods to derive, as I said, these parameters: age, metallicity, distance, and so on. Again, with Markov chain Monte Carlo sampling methods. Okay, so for the isochron fitting, we have now in VISCACHA 2 codes to do that, and one of them is open source, so it's available on GitHub. It's called Siesta code. It was published 2 years ago in paper 11 from VISCACHA. And it compares, so it simulates synthetic CMDs, which as I said, it includes like the baryon fraction, the observational errors. Oh, it's here. So initial mass function, completeness, all these properties. So it simulates the cluster or several clusters and compares with the observations statistically to get the best fitting synthetic CMDs, or meaning the best fitting parameters, free parameters, yes. So this is an example for a young cluster with 60 million years from Siesta. And also these other codes that we have, Sirius code, this one is not public. So initially we didn't apply synthetic CMDs, meaning that we just compared directly the isochrones and the stars in the CMD and like make some likelihood study and fit the best isochrone. But currently it also includes synthetic CMDs functions. So as you can see, the parameters are very consistent with one another. So that's good. So now for the results, I won't take too long. So I just highlight some recent VISCACHA papers, all from last year, actually. So this one from Stefano Souza, we were able to study the extended main sequence turnoff of Magellanic Clouds clusters, which can be an indicative of maybe multiple populations, stellar rotation, binary effects. So we didn't find an answer for that phenomena. We just were able to observe it with VISCACHA photometry. So another result from last year was, get some water. Was studying star clusters in the Southern Bridge, which I also didn't mention, but it's just another external region from this SMC, and deriving the age metallicity and plotting with some chemical evolution models. It was found some like agreement between the models and the observations with a dip in metallicity around 6 billion years, which I'll explain in a moment. And also the last VISCACHA paper, Bernardo Ferreira analyzed 85 clusters from the LMC, and also did a similar analysis, I mean, with several figures. Here I highlight the age metallicity relation for the LMC, which is also consistent with the models. Actually, I didn't put here, there was another paper that we found an age gap cluster. So a LMC cluster with age between 4 and 10 billion years with VISCACHA data. Okay, so just reviewing the results that I had in my PhD, or months after that. So in paper 7, I analyzed 33 bridge clusters. It was the first determination of age for 9 clusters and first metallicity for 18. We estimated the bridge stellar mass from these clusters. Like we extrapolated the individual masses for the clusters, for the number of clusters and field stars and so on, which is 1 order of magnitude larger than previously known. And a more recent study from Ficara et al. 2026 found a similar result, similar number. So these are the clusters analyzed in red and black. And when we plotted the age metallicity relation, we see that it agreed with the models except for 2 metallicity dips. So one around 1 billion year and one more recent around 200 million years. And surprisingly, this is the age of the Magellanic String and the Magellanic Bridge. So we believe that this was because there was some more metal poor material falling in the bridge or in the SMC, and then you got some clusters more metal poor than expected. Okay, so just reviewing like very quickly here, there was no clear spatial pattern in ages and metallicity, but we found that the cluster is older than the age of the bridge, which is 300 million years, followed the SMC gradients in age and metallicity, whereas the youngest ones doesn't follow. So they were formed in situ and don't follow the SMC gradients. Here it's just overplotted over the gas distribution. And we obviously need more statistics here, which is why we applied for some time with Goodman, like SOAR telescope, and also with ESO, but we didn't get time for that. To observe, forgot to say, to observe these green objects, and also, more importantly, feeling the left side of the bridge, closest to the LMC. So recently we did an agreement between VISCACHA and Delphi surveys. Delphi is, how can I say? So a gathering of all the data obtained with the dark energy camera. So it includes DAS data, SMASH data, and some other survey. And it just like recompiles everything, reproduces, reprocesses, and releases this data. So we did this agreement. We use data that are not released yet. And then they shared with us data for the entire bridge, and we shared with them the photometry for the 33 clusters. So it will last till the end of the next year and so on. We have monthly meetings, very interesting science going on. Yeah, and then I have a comparison here between VISCACHA and SMASH data, going for more internal radii in the cluster when you go to the right. So as you can see in the left panels in the right, VISCACHA is more complete in the central parts, so it has more stars. But looking at the CMD, doing all the steps that I mentioned, we found very similar parameters, like age, everything. So except the structural parameters. So the conclusion here is that we need to sample the center in order to derive precise structural parameters, but for the CMD, it's okay to not be so complete in the center. And then we started this collaboration trying to detect clusters in these wide field data, like before doing all the analysis that we are used to, because we expect that some clusters will still not be visible, or maybe they are not real, the cataloged clusters and associations. So here's an example, forgot to mention, but the data in the other slide is just one of these squares that are called bricks. And I applied some tools that I had, like for the density estimation locally and so on, stellar density. And here you can see, for example, yellow point, the yellow region in the bottom, and also a black cross, which means this is a real cluster, already cataloged, very well studied, which, applying clustering methods that we implemented, we were able to retrieve at least this one in the bottom. But as you can see, there is another point up there, which is a younger cluster that we didn't detect. So yes, so it means that we cannot apply these clustering methods blindly, like just automatically and find the clusters. So one of the steps that we are applying here is to filter regions of the CMD according to ages, because the metallicity is more or less well defined. So doing that and isolating this data for the young or younger isochrones, we can see a more clear overdensity, as we call, in the original part of the cross. So in this case, like doing this filtering in the CMD, we are able to retrieve this younger cluster, right? So another very popular tool for clustering and cluster detection, at least in the Milky Way, it's dbScan. It's called dbScan, which uses proper motions. So as I said, proper motions are limited to magnitude 20, and we are here around 23, 24. So I tested for Magellanic Clouds, like doing this cut in magnitude, and it worked for the well-populated clusters, such as Cron 7 and Cron 3. Oh, there is gray points that we cannot see very well here. So I retrieved these two clusters, but not the, for example, the least massive one. Okay. Like I tried several different things, like injecting fake proper motions and so on. It didn't work. So yeah, for the well-populated clusters is okay. And some other problem that we have here, that in the bridge we have several sparse associations, which are not expected to have overdensities as a normal cluster. So another example of brick data in brick. In the top right, we have a known association, which barely was detected using the clustering algorithms. And I was not happy with that. So using like some discussions that we did in like Statistical Journal Club, for example, I applied other tools to try to detect these clusters. So one of them is Voronoi tessellation, which I hope you have heard one day. So it basically divides the plane in regions based on the proximity of each point. So it works for clusters, but it's not the best option for this case of sparse associations. And the one that I am very enthusiastic is the minimal spanning tree that I applied for the same brick, and it recovered the sparse association. So even though it's not a clear overdensity. So one conclusion here, it's a work in progress, but we have retrieved around 80% of the VISCACHA clusters and associations. The bridge has around 300 of them. And we detected some promising cluster candidates, which we'll still follow up, like determine, see if it's really an overdensity, a real overdensity, if the CMD is very good and so on, to get more conclusions. And finally, some take-home messages. So the first is about the bridge in general, like from my previous studies. Basically, the metallicity dips are the most curious part, which we need to obtain more statistics. As I shown, the wide field data is reinforcing VISCACHA results in most of the cases. And this delvMC data is allowing to detect clusters down to 24 magnitude. I wanted to mention here the Monica's work from 2017 with OGO data. So like combining the exposures, I remember that they got till 20 magnitude 22, more or less. So we are going slightly deeper than that. And a lot of data is to come, and we are going to discover a lot of things, and most importantly, constrain the models. In this case, for the Magellanic Clouds formation. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Raphael.
Thank you.
Very, very nice and clear. Any questions, comments, Raphael? No?
I have a question. Why? You say that you can detect the stars association, but how you actually can verify that? If you have like detect something, how you verify if it's really association or not? There is only a few stars.
Yes. So we have this catalog of clusters and associations that we are using as benchmark. We didn't define exactly the parameters to define like a threshold, like this is a cluster, this is not. But after we get a good sample of both overdensities from the other method or these associations, we are still like going to follow up, like checking the density around the center, the CMD, with all the data that we have. So even with Gaia, if the purple motions can tell something. But yeah, but they will be candidates. Like if the CMD is okay, we can publish them, but more observations would be better to conclude.
More questions? I have a question about the metallicity of a given cluster, because some of the error bars were actually pretty small. And so you take it from isochrone fitting from MCMC. This is, or you do it like separately for every cluster, or? Yeah,
we do it for each cluster in the isochrone fitting, but I forgot to mention that we also do some spectroscopic follow-up.
That sounds exact. I meant this spot that some of the error bars in this
so
y-axis are small. Okay, so
for the clusters older than 1 billion years, we have enough red giant stars to get metallicity from calcium triplets. So we first do that, and then like use priors in metallicity.
Okay.
And that's why the error bars are smaller. But it also helps in the other parameters as well.
Right, thank you. Any questions? Do we have anyone from Zoom? No, I don't see anything. Mariusz, can you check? Okay, so if there's no more questions, thanks a lot, and thank you once again for the very last minute preparation.
That's fine.
And next week we're gonna hear about AGNs. We will have a guest from Croatia. I mean, actually from Poznan, from Croatia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maurits.
Hi, Maurits.
He's here.
Maybe he was here.
Maybe
But he was at the
like,
conference, right?
yeah, he was, but he's skiing somewhere.
Is he? Or is he stayed in mainland? In Europe here?
One.
Oh.
It's still